Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from Expedition Bigfoot. You're listening to the Paranomaly Zone.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen. A ghostly apparition in the dark of night.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Hey there, ponderers of the paranormal and fans of true crime podcast content. You are in the Paranomaly Zone, your place for all things paranormal, strange, and mysterious. And yes, it is time for another deep dive into true crime. My name is Patrick Koffenberg, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host with the ghosts, the paranormal poster boy himself, dare I say, a professor of the paranormal, Mr. Michael Carbno. Mike, good to see you, my friend. How do you feel about being referred to as a professor of the paranormal?
It just doesn't fit.
Oh.
I'm a professor of what?
Well, like our last Patreon episode.
Yes.
Paranormal 101, you know.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was, you know, imagine you are lecturing a class, an auditorium full of frothing at the mouth students. I don't know why they'd be frothing at the mouth, but
most likely rabies.
Maybe rabies. Or maybe they've all just fallen asleep and they're drooling because
just frothing. They're frothing.
That was fun though. But I jokingly referred to you as the professor of the paranormal, and I figured that you wouldn't like that term.
A nutty professor.
No, definitely not the nutty professor. But
I'm gonna sign up all the zoners that listen to us.
The zoners.
Yeah, that came across my mind. Was it yesterday? Everybody that listens to us, they're zoners.
I kind of like that.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Struck me. We love our zoners.
Now, and in no way that's not meant to be taken in a derogatory way or
hell no.
Negative way.
No, absolutely not.
Like they're zoning out, or something like that. I kind of like that.
They're in the zone.
Okay. Every time you say that, though, I want to say auto zone after that. And those obnoxious
auto zone.
Those obnoxious commercials, but I kind of like that. Yeah. Our fellow zoners.
Yeah, and I just brought that up, and I didn't even talk to you about it first, or message you saying, "Hey, let's call our wonderful, beautiful listeners zoners."
Zoners. Okay, well, tell us if you like that or not.
Let us
all of
know.
you who are listening out there, we might see if that takes off. I kind of like that.
If you wish not to be labeled a zoner when you're listening to us, or if you're listeners of us, then let us know.
Yeah, we love hearing from you all the time. So, well, not all the time, I should say.
Yeah.
Every time we hear from you, we love it. So
weekdays I go to bed very early, so
yeah,
if it's fairly earlier, you want to get a hold of me, hey, I'm up for that.
Yeah. He's up for a little paranormal 101 any time of the day.
That's right. Hey, got any questions? I will do my best to answer.
Except after bedtime. So
come into my office, sit down, let's talk.
There you go. I kind of like that. I like that, zoners. So, all right, let's try that out. Well, Mike, it is time for, like I said in the intro there, another wickedly interesting,
I don't like it,
disturbing, I don't know how else to describe it. They all, and when I say fascinating, I'm not saying that in like this, oh my gosh, this is so cool and so fascinating.
We're not saying it in an admiring way at
Absolutely not. But I think it's human nature to be fascinated by people who are sick. And
it's fascinating to just see what is out there. I mean, to try to understand, which we never will understand the mind of these people, but that there's actually stuff like this that has gone on and is most likely still going on and that we don't know of yet. It's horrible. Horrifying, terrifying.
Do you think, Mike, and before I forget, tonight we're diving into one of the most animalistic serial killers ever. And if you are not familiar with Fritz Haarmann,
Friedrich Heinrich Karl Haarmann,
known by several monikers, the Butcher of Hanover, the Vampire of Hanover, the Wolfman of Hanover.
I like that one.
You'll understand why he's described as all of those. But my, oh my, this was one sick puppy, and he destroyed countless lives, just like all these sick bastards did. And we're going to talk about him, and we're going to feel like we need a shower afterwards.
It's weird, though, that, going over all of these serial killers and trying to figure out, okay, which one should we talk about? Because there's so many.
Unfortunately, yes.
That we've never heard of, that are some of the most diabolical, whatever you want to call them.
Unfortunately, they are people.
Yes, but we hear about like the Ted Bundy and the Ed Gein and everything, and all of that stuff. And as horrible as they are, there are serial killers out there that are as horrible, if not even more horrifying. That we've never heard of them before.
Their methods of murder and their depraved lives, just they're shocking. It's going to be interesting for sure. And I don't want to say fun either, but it's fascinating, pops in my mind over and over and over again, but I guess I can't think of a better word right now. It is what it is, man. It's human nature, as I said, to be fascinated by these whack jobs. And I was going to ask you, Mike, briefly, do you truly think that we will never understand what's going on in the minds of these people? I mean, do you truly believe that? You think that someday we will have a quote unquote answer and maybe be able to prevent such tragedies as this from occurring?
I hope so. There are people that are a lot smarter than I am that, maybe they've got more of a grasp on it, but has it stopped anything? I don't know.
Well, that's just the thing, and serial killers, they evolve and change with the times too.
Exactly.
And so they'll develop new methods of evading law enforcement and evading capture. And it's, again, as we of course we have to bring it up again, but we briefly talked about it on our appearance on Talk is Jericho. We talked about serial killers and the difference between, serial killers of the past and do they even exist nowadays?
Right.
And we kind of said, well, yeah, but they're just they exist in a different manner. They're like all of us. They live in a world of immediate satisfaction where the world is literally at their fingertips, and they go through these horrific mass shootings. These moments of killing people within a moment of within minutes.
And that's how Chris Jericho is bringing that across. And then and he was also saying something to the effect of, has law enforcement and techniques surpassed the serial killer, the way serial killers used to be and the way they used to do their killing, because you don't hear about them anymore. And I kind of came back as saying, but has the serial killer actually changed enough with the times and doing the serial killer one at a time, finding somebody and disposing of them or whatever, but doing it to a degree that keeping one step ahead of technology if they can, or how things are, done now with law enforcement or
utilizing technology to stay one step ahead of law enforcement.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's frightening. It always has been, and it always will be, man. There's always going to be those depraved, evil individuals out there.
In one way or another.
Fritz Haarmann is right up there, Mike. As you mentioned earlier, I'll profess my ignorance to all the details surrounding this man's life. And I'd heard of the moniker, the Butcher of Hanover, more particularly the Vampire of Hanover. But I wouldn't be able to, if you asked me a week ago, I wouldn't be able to tell you, oh yeah, the Vampire of Hanover, that's Fritz Haarmann, and he did this and he did that. No way I would have been able to do that. After studying, doing some research into this man's life, wow. Where do we begin? Where do we want to begin, Mike? Should we just go through kind of the tail of the tape here, some of the basics just to get rolling, and then we'll move forward as we go, I guess.
Right. When I was researching this and everything, and I wanted to see what his childhood was like, and his mother and father, and because it always seems like these serial killers and the ones that we've talked about, they have some very horrifying sometimes childhoods, and that kind of bring them up to where they turn into what they do. He did have some issues growing up, but a mother that they had a great relationship. She spoiled him.
She coddled him, everything like that. Who they were was Ollie and Johanna Haarmann. The parents, yes, Ollie and
the
Johanna.
Parents, yeah.
Johanna, I think it was, right? Correct.
Johanna.
And he was. Let's make this clear. He was the youngest of 6 children.
Of 6 kids, yep.
As you mentioned,
on October 25th, 1879.
Yes, passed away by beheading, and we'll get to that. April 15th, 1925. He had a relationship with his mother that would, I guess would be, for lack of a better term, described as odd.
It was. He was a quiet child, didn't have very many friends his own age or gender. It said seldom socializing with any of the children outside of school, mostly spending time with his siblings.
The thing the thing that really kind of started setting him apart even more, particularly when you think about the time, the day and the age. We're talking, the late 1800s. It wasn't a normal thing for a child, a young boy, to have a mother insisting on dressing him up as a girl, preferring that he would be, definitely, making him lean towards the feminine, and he didn't participate in the quote unquote masculine activities that all the other younger boys did.
Right. Teachers actually described him as effeminate, and just like the coddled. I mean, they could see that he was coddled and just spoiled. That's how he came across.
The dad did not like that.
Mollycoddled, as it said.
The dad did not like that. We need to make that clear. The relationship between Fritz and his father was anything but loving and caring, and he was basically treated by his father as like a disappointment since he was a little kid.
Right, and not much of a father, in general, with any of the kids. Didn't spend much time with them, and it was said that he actually married his mother, which she was much older than he was. And the father married the mother for a large dowry, knew that he was going to get money, and she was well off financially.
What a guy.
And he had a lot of affairs and things like that during the marriage. They stayed married until she passed away. But it was, not a real loving relationship.
Oh, hell no. No, not even close.
Yeah. But he was...
go ahead.
Prone to daydreaming in school. The behavior at school was always good, but with the way the teachers described it, but his schoolwork really lacked in, he just wasn't really good at the learning and the schoolwork itself.
No, he wasn't definitely wasn't an academic, that's for sure.
He actually repeated a school year twice. So not the best student, but
Yeah, Miss Haarmann was also, she was frail and sickly, and she actually, she died when Fritz was pretty young still, 12 years old. I mean, that's still, that can be traumatic, man. A parent who passes away when you are young, that can send you any number of ways. Of course it can.
Well, and you know exactly how that feels.
Well, sure, yeah. And I'm here doing podcasts, and so as we mentioned, his father and Fritz's relationship, anything but loving. It actually came to the point where they came to blows eventually later on down the road, which sent, needless to say, it sent Ollie into a rage so much as that he had Fritz sent off to a mental asylum.
Right.
He didn't want anything to do with this kid. Now let's think about that for a second too, and we're not making excuses. We're not trying to give reasons as to the sick and depraved behavior here of people like Fritz Haarmann, but we want to understand it too. I mean, there's people who are totally on the side of nature, and there are others who are on the side of nurture. And I think, Mike, you're with me in that we kind of look at it as a combination of both. It could have been a combination of genetics and how he was raised when he was young. I mean, again, we have to understand during this time, Mike, it wasn't a commonly accepted thing to, well, for lack of a better term, be a transvestite. He truly liked it. He felt that was him.
Right. Well, actually, when he was a young child and he wasn't, playing the sports and the more boyish games, he chose to play with his sister's dolls and actually dress in their clothes. And that was as a young child. So, being gay or the homosexuality, was just something that was always, well, we can get into a whole different subject on that matter if you're born that way or.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I gotcha.
But yeah.
It was not.
It
was not it was definitely something that was frowned upon. And thank God that we are moving along, and we have been slowly but surely, and we're at the stage where we are today. It's still not perfect, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer. But that someone like Fritz felt an enormous amount of shame for how he felt, and that could possibly
at that time,
that could possibly have driven him to any number of things. But again, we're not making excuses by any means, because this man was obviously sick and evil. I'm going to throw it out there. Mentally ill, yes, but he enjoyed what he did.
Right, and he was actually molested by a teacher at a very young age. I think he was 8 years old or something like that, which could have been a huge turning point for him.
I also came across some info. I'm not exactly sure how substantiated they are, but I found in a couple different places that Fritz's father also perhaps murdered someone in his day. I think it was a railway worker or someone who worked in the train station. And one of his older brothers was also arrested for a sexual assault. So again, that is there something that's kind of in the genes there that kind of maybe tends to lead them towards. Yeah, I don't know. I hate saying that. I really do hate saying that.
But we don't know. I mean, I know of family situations that go back generations with things like that.
Sure.
And I want to say here too, going back to what you were talking about, his obvious, sexuality, that when he, discovered of what his sexuality was and everything, when we're talking about that and his being gay, transvestite, whatever, playing with dolls, dressing in his sister's clothes, we are by no means saying that has anything to do with somebody
Oh no, absolutely
moving
not.
into a life of
No.
debauchery or anything
No,
like that.
no, absolutely not.
Because I was starting to think like, yeah, that's. I don't know. I hope people don't think that we're putting that into the why he is.
I don't think our listeners
right.
think of that. But we
our
have to make it
listeners
clear, though.
know us.
Yeah.
But like you had said, like at that time, things were different, and things, it was so, there's as many gay people then as there is now, but it was a hidden thing for the most part, and
oh God, you were
people were ashamed because it was out of the norm.
Absolutely.
So that could be a part, that guilt and that shame that he felt because of it at that time.
You were shamed.
That period of time could have a part in that, but not because of him being gay or anything like that.
You were shunned. You were admonished. Right. You were essentially considered mentally ill if you were,
which we do not
gay.
Go by or condone or
hell
have
no.
that thought at all.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Yeah. Let's see. Moving forward, again, we're not giving this guy a pass by any means, because even as a very young man, he showed some kind of sadistic tendencies.
Oh, absolutely.
There were stories of his utter joy during terrorizing his siblings, where he would, this is how the stories go, tie down his sisters at night and terrorize them any number of ways. I read one account where he would also sneak around. I mean, this sounds innocuous almost, but he got utter glee and joy out of watching his sisters react in such fearful ways when he would go outside the house and tap out on their windows and make shrieking ghostly like noises and make them think
that's something I'd get it kicked out of.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But the part when you're tying them down, though,
right, exactly, that's taking it over the top.
That's a little bit. That's a bit much. I mean, he got off on getting them scared. So
right.
Now there's something going on there that we can't.
Well, and even as a young child, he would lure young children into typically a cellar and sexually molest them, even as a young child.
Yeah, and that's, I think by the time he was at 18, he had already been arrested.
He went through a lot of arrests, a lot of jail time, in and out, and actually escaped at one time with the help of his mother.
Again, there's the loving mother. So if his mother passed away when he was 12, so he was already incarcerated.
Exactly. Yes, very young.
Now that's, again, you can't just dismiss that. I mean, there's something. This was a very troubled and disturbed young boy. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that one. Yeah, unfortunately, he was, for Fritz, he how do I want to say this? He definitely escalated and evolved the proverbial mountain of criminality. He started off with kind of petty crimes, burglary, just any number of things. And then, of course, he starts getting into the awful sexual assaults. And then
throwing kittens off of bridges.
I was going to say, I didn't see that one. Okay, Mike, come on now. It's, it just got worse and worse and worse, until he eventually became a serial rapist and a serial murderer. And it's, I don't know, there's no other way to describe it other than he was a demented individual who did not want to stop. Let's get in some of the gritty details here, Mike.
Gritty.
No, I said gritty. Gritty. No, I didn't say gritty. Good God Almighty. Some of the stuff that we need to look into. Now, I did pull up this really interesting article here. In 1895, Fritz began studying to become a locksmith. But as you mentioned earlier, he was a very poor student, and he was very discouraged when he failed his exams. He decided to try another profession, later
Well,
that
he
year.
actually had quit school
Yes.
with permission of his parents.
Now, this other profession was a training school for non-commissioned officers, and he joined this when he was nearly 15, and that's actually where he started to kind of find himself. He actually started doing fairly well in the second occupation here. Did what he was told by his superiors. He was a responsible student, and it was interesting. He actually discovered he had a physical talent as far as athleticism. He found out that he had a talent for gymnastics.
Right, he did. And as he grew up, he did become stronger and in better physical condition.
Right. Though he was kind of, I won't say excelling here, that didn't last either because Fritz actually ended up suffering an accident where he sustained a very severe concussion. Now, again, there's another thing that could add to an already unstable mind. You see all the after effects, Mike, from former football players who suffered from CTE, who have been diagnosed with CTE, concussion, all this trauma that their brains have been going through and their brains just slowly deteriorate. This is a young man who suffers a severe concussion.
Yeah.
That could go any number of ways as well, but certainly didn't help. Certainly.
I know. My brain went through a lot of trauma in my early years and through high school until I thought, God, I got to quit doing that stuff.
I understand.
It was fun. Saturday morning cartoons. Oh, what a bunch of fun that was.
I get you.
My brain cells started really complaining.
Now, also, this concussion could have very well led to what became an unfortunate regular occurrence for Fritz, where he started suffering seizures.
Yes.
And he would lose consciousness. I believe he was.
That was after 5 months of being in the military. He had started getting these.
Was he diagnosed as epileptic?
Well, not right away. First they had said it was signs of anxiety neurosis.
Oh, okay.
But then subsequently later it was diagnosed as being equivalent to epilepsy.
Okay.
And then, And then in 1895, he actually discharged himself from the military, which I've never heard of being able to do that. But
yeah, that's interesting.
Hey, it's Germany. I have no idea. But then, getting back to his father again, he started working in his father's cigar factory after that.
Yeah. Yep. Lived at home, worked for his father. And it was during this time where his I guess, cravings or lust for young boys started to really come to the forefront for Fritz. A few young boys in the neighborhood started making accusations towards Fritz, saying that he was making sexual advances towards them and actually molesting them. And again, his father took him, after hearing such accusations, took him to be examined by a physician.
Mm-hmm.
And the physician, I actually wrote this, I found a really interesting article, and I wrote down the German words for his diagnosis. After this one right here, this local physician diagnosed him, forgive me if I butcher this, I shouldn't because I'm German, for Christ's sake, Geisteskrankheit. Geisteskrankheit, which basically means mentally ill / insane. He's committed to an asylum. He was just 18 years old at that time.
Mm-hmm.
He's not off to a good start. Now, his stay at this one didn't last very long. An event actually happened which led him even more terrified of going back to such places. Upon being, or actually every day he was there, he was begging to be released. He was making promises that he would change, that he'd be a better person, yada yada yada. What they all would say. And Mike might have mentioned this earlier. Rather than wait and see if they actually would listen to him, let him go, he decided to escape, and he did. And he ran away to Switzerland, where he was a refugee.
Yes. Stayed with relatives of his mother.
Yeah.
In Switzerland.
He didn't stay there for very long either, though. He was homesick, and he came back to Hanover.
Yeah, went back to Hanover.
I know. I keep saying Hanover, and you say Hanover.
Well, if you're going to do it the German way, it's got to be Hanover.
When he did come back to Hanover, he decided to join the military, but he was booted out after 1 year due to his prior injuries. I'm assuming it was his head injuries, which also led him.
He had like a medical discharge, is what it was. Yeah.
That concussion, I think, also left him fairly crippled. And so that might have something to do with his being discharged here. It's interesting how they finally discharged him after a year. It's like, you think they wouldn't even let him in?
Well, and he spent, was it months in the hospital, and then they discharged him after that, I think. Something to that effect. Yeah, I don't know.
After being discharged from the Army, he returned back home, and again, his dad tried to have him recommitted to the asylum. This didn't work this time, and Fritz moved into his own place on 27 Sellerstrasse. Now, this was here when all of the true horror, I was going to say horror and crime, the true crime horror began. Fritz. Horror, yes, 2 syllables. Horror. 2 syllables, everybody. It was while living at 27 Sellerstrasse in September 1918 that Fritz committed his first homicide.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting, before we move on into the truly sick and twisted part of Fritz's life here, is that between his first murder and his second murder, there was a span of over 4 years where he did anything else, well, as far as, to that level of grotesque violence, because he had met his lover at the time, and that his young lover, half his age, Hans Grans, however you want to pronounce it, handsome young man, was let's just say he was a male prostitute who offered himself to Fritz, and they were together. They became fast friends, and as we'll learn later,
they became really good close friends.
Fast friends, lovers, and as we will talk about later, his accomplice in a lot of these horrific acts.
But also, he got married.
Thank you for not leave that out. Thank you, Mike. I totally walked over that one. And did he not father a child?
He did.
But he left before less than a year? I think that's what it was. He did not stick around. That's for sure. It's almost, it's like, what was he trying to be quote unquote normal?
There must be something, I don't know. Yeah, the quote unquote, let's see, he was working in a shipyard, and after 16 months he returned, when he did return to Hanover. So we kind of covered this time period earlier. 1899, as he became engaged to Erna Lowert.
Yes, that's right. Erna
who soon became pregnant. 1900 he ended up having to perform his compulsory military service, whatever that means. So I don't know.
Is that a required term of service?
It must be, in Germany, that might have been a thing at that time. And that's at the time where he is hospitalized for 4 months and discharged for medical reasons.
Yeah.
And, and for a decade after that is when he was living as a petty thief, a burglar, con artist, and spending that time in jail in and out for larceny and embezzlement and all these other little petty crimes.
Oh yeah, he was well known to law enforcement.
Well, to the point where he became an informant for the law enforcement, but he had his own reasons for doing that. It was like getting on the good side of the law, and
it's almost
also was to gain access to young males. It said. Well, how that happens, I don't know.
How is the saying where it's like it's in plain sight and you can't see it? It's
right, redirecting attention from himself.
Yeah.
And his own criminal activities. It's like, look at me, I'm helping you guys. I'm not doing anything wrong.
I think I read that he was arrested so often that it was essentially over the course of a decade. It was basically every other year. It amounted to 1 year in prison / jail, and then 1 year out, and then 1 year in, and then 1 year out. I mean, he was he couldn't help himself. And
the chief of police at that time started sending him Christmas cards, birthday cards,
Good to see you again, Fritz. Yeah. We miss you here, Come on down.
How you doing there, Fritz? Come on in for a snort.
I like that. That's actually probably
over old times.
Is that a legit German thing? A snort?
Schnortenhausen.
Yeah, of course, that's SCHNORT. Schnorton.
Snort. Snort. That's after too many snorts.
That's after a few too many schnorts.
Anyway.
So, computer Mike, is that a legit German word?
I don't know.
Oh, that was actually computer Chris walking. That wasn't computer Mike. Yeah, wrong one. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Mike agrees. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, we have to try and throw humor in every now and then, even during
Well,
these true
of course.
crime episodes, because it's almost like it brings us back to reality, or just
And that's just the way it is.
It is just the way it is.
It's like horror and humor.
Now, the story behind his first murder, his first victim was Friedel Roth. Now, I have seen both spellings of where it says Roth, but I've also seen an E at the end of it, so I think it's pronounced Roth. Friedel was a runaway, which is what Fritz became to... that was his favorite target, by the way. Not only were they young boys and young men, young teenagers, but he would hunt down vagrants. He'd hunt down people who would hang out at the railway stations, commuters. Again, every now and then he would target male prostitutes.
Right.
He had his modus operandi would evolve throughout the years, but it basically it was limited in its involvement. I should make that clear. But he would offer them either work, he would offer them a place to stay, or he would approach them as a police officer. Now, this is I need to say this before I forget. He actually introduced himself so often as a police officer to these younger boys that a railway station security guard, when questioned about him, actually said, "Yeah, I know Fritz. He's a police officer."
Yeah. And sometimes he would go under the name Harry Callahan.
Well, I don't know about that one. No, I don't think so.
Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, I know it's Dirty Harry. Wait, Dirty Fritz? Dirty Fritz. Yeah. Or Dirty Haarmann.
Yeah. But, the one, Rolf's family, they actually really, put on a lot of pressure to the police to actually look into it further with Haarmann. So they raided his apartment that was in October 1918, where they found their informer in the company of a semi-naked 13-year-old boy.
Yes.
God.
Now, think about this for a second. His criminal act right there, which it is, his sexually deviant act with this 13-year-old boy saved him because, as whacked out as this sounds, upon entering his apartment and seeing him with this boy, that's all they focused on. I mean, rightly so. And he was arrested. He ended up serving 9 months for that. Nearly a year and a half later, he finally began...
For sexual assault and battery of a minor.
Yeah, it took a long time before he finally served that 9 months. But as he came to profess later... Mike, did you want to say what happened?
If it's what I'm thinking, Haarmann later said, I'm going to read this so it gets the the whole impact here. Haarmann later said to detectives that when they searched his apartment, the head of Friedel Roth was stowed behind his stove, wrapped in newspaper.
Yep.
Oof.
So you get what I'm saying there. Since they were just focused on what they were seeing in front of them, they didn't bother to search the house.
Which should have been a red flag for what they were there raiding his apartment for.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I tell you, man, this guy, he definitely lucked out on many occasions, that's for sure. Now, it was after his final arrest, and Haarmann was finally confessing to all of his atrocious acts. That's, as Mike just said, that's when he confessed to that murder. Friedel's had been discovered, or should have been discovered, behind the stove wrapped in newspaper. Now, it was after his release in 1919, this is when Fritz met young Hans Grans at the
Hans
Grans at the railway station.
When I hear that Hans Grans, I picture old Germany, somebody on skates but then it's like that's Hans Christian Andersen.
Are you like thinking
And I don't
about,
think that's even German, is it?
no, I don't think so. I thought you were going to go with like a Blades of Glory type reference there, but I guess I'm not. I
totally failed on that.
You did, but that's okay.
Anyway, Hans Grans.
No, then
He was a runaway,
mentioned,
actually.
he was a young boy, young teenager, young man, and as they said, they quickly formed a friendship that turned into a morbid and deviant sexual relationship. He was with them till the end, until he was finally arrested. And, we won't have time to dive into his kind of spectacular trial that he went through, but Mr. Haarmann eventually, I guess, tried to shift the focus onto Hans by saying he was involved in these murders, which he eventually was convicted of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place here. Hans was initially convicted to death, as was Fritz, but just simply by chance, awaiting his fate, when a letter was found on the road by just a simple passerby, Mike. It found this random letter, which was learned to be written by Fritz as a confessional letter to Hans's father, saying that Hans had nothing to do with all of his acts and that he should not be treated the same way as he was. And upon learning of this letter, Hans's conviction was retracted from, I guess, execution to 12 years in prison. How about that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Just by fate, this letter was seen on the ground.
Right. And, I can't help but wonder and think about, so Hans, like I said, he had run away from home in Berlin, following an argument with his father. So Hans, he was sleeping and hanging around the Hanover station, which is one of the things that Fritz used to like to kind of patrol and look for people.
Absolutely.
He was there for approximately 2 weeks selling old clothes just to try to eat. So I think was Hans possibly going to be a victim of Fritz? But then there's something that happened where, oh no, I'm not going to kill this guy. We're going to become something more, and it's going to be a pretty awesome thing for Fritz. And
absolutely, I think that's a possibility. I think that's a possibility. And again, we also have to just kind of look at it as simply Fritz was sexually satisfied by Hans. I mean, he was that
attraction.
He was an attraction. He, I guess, for lack of a better term, satiated Fritz's desires for a time being, so much so that he didn't, as far as we know, commit any murders for the first 4 years of their relationship.
Yeah.
So that's something that makes you think.
Well, and then like the old clothes that Hans was trying to sell just to eat, he would also sell, bundled tube socks, and he would store them in the front of his pants, and and Fritz, that's what really caught Fritz's attention in the first place. You should see Patrick's face right now. Good God.
I missed that part.
Yeah.
But I got you.
Whew.
Well, and it needs to be pointed out, too, is that Fritz and Hans were kind of seen as just kind of highfalutin members of society at this time. Right. They were seen going in and out about doing their business. No one had the slightest suspicions of what was going on behind the scenes. And it blows me away to think of just how ignorant we can all be as to what is truly going on behind the eyes of someone. It's like, you seem like a normal person, but are you really?
Well, and Hans was actually, he said that his sexual orientation was heterosexual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure.
And he claims that he actually initiated contact with Haarmann with the intention of prostituting himself, after having heard that Haarmann's homosexuality through acquaintance he had established. So yeah, it's convoluted.
Now, while he did not, as suggests that he did not, while he did not commit murders in the first 4 years of his relationship, he still led a life of petty crime. He turned to theft to provide money, steal clothes from the laundry, and both he and Hans would kind of flourish by stealing clothes from local laundries and selling them to people throughout the neighborhood, poor men and women throughout the neighborhood. We have to understand another thing too. This is during a time of depravity, and this is immediately after World War I. Germany is thrown into a flux.
After losing the war, everything was just
inflation sky high. The starvation. People were struggling. So again, this kind of makes you realize how manipulative and evil Fritz is, because he's like, well, I'm going to take advantage of those who are suffering, and we're going to use it to our benefits. We're going to steal from people, and we're going to sell the crap that we find, and just because we take advantage of the lowly. But
well, my great grandfather in Canada, they went through all of that, depression type stuff, and my great grandfather, he actually sold apples from an apple cart on the street.
Oh, that's awesome.
To make enough of money to, support. They had like 1 billion kids, but
that's awesome.
Well, quite a few kids, not 1 billion, but yeah, they weren't like China or anything like that. But that'd be kind of hard for one couple. I gotcha. Yeah, but I just, and he had this little tiny dog that he had with him all the time, selling these little apples. And anyway, but yeah, just a little diversion there into sanity.
No, I gotcha. I understand. You need it. You need that every now and then. Now, in 1923, Fritz finally gave into his urges, his bloodlust to kill. They finally came to a head. His next victim, Fritz Frank. And what makes this even more disturbing, all of this is disturbing. All this is it's maddening. Fritz met Fritz Frank at the Hanover railway station, and he approached Fritz under the guise that he was a police officer. He actually approached 2 boys, Fritz among them. The other boy, Fritz Haarmann, didn't find attractive at all. He found him to be repulsive, and he didn't want anything to do with this boy, so he scooted him along the way there. He had
a large boil on the side of his face.
I have no idea. No clue, but he definitely wasn't to Fritz Haarmann's liking. And you know what? His large boil saved his life, Mike. So
yeah.
Now, as he sent this boy on his way, he charmed Fritz into coming back home with him, and that's the last time anyone saw Fritz Frank alive. Now, he was
actually a 17-year-old pianist.
Now, is that true? I cannot tell if you're giving me crap or not, Mike. Is that true?
Yeah, the second murder that Haarmann is known to have committed occurred on 12 February 1923. The victim was a 17-year-old pianist named Fritz Frank.
Okay, I never saw anything about a pianist, so that's why I can't tell.
He actually invited him to his residence.
Yeah.
Where he introduced him to Hans Grans.
And this is where it gets interesting.
And 2 female acquaintances, one of who was Grans' female lover.
Well, this one, I think, Mike, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, because what I have read and what I have seen in a few different articles was that this is where Hans actually stumbled upon Fritz after he murdered Fritz Frank.
Yeah.
And upon realizing this, Fritz Haarmann panicked, and he thought that, well, shit, am I going to have to kill Hans now because he sees what I have done? But much to his delight, I wrote this down, actually, Mike, because it blows me away. Upon walking in and discovering the body of the young man, Hans simply asked, "When shall I come back again?"
Right. Yeah. Should I let me know when you're going to be down here, and I'll just be back then.
This delighted Fritz to no end. I mean, he's like, oh my gosh, and now he's like, I might have an accomplice. He knows this. He knows what I've done. maybe we can get even better at it. Two's better than one, I guess. And so
Sure.
begins the accomplice, the murderous relationship between the two. And it's the rest is history. Sad, sad history, that's for sure. Now, when we get to, when you listen to people talk about true crime, you ask them what intrigues them, or what stands out to you. Quite often people say, well, just how many, they killed so many people. This guy killed this many, and this person killed this many. It becomes like a numbers game. And, I've fallen victim to that too. I'm sure you have, Mike, and it's like, oh my gosh, this person has killed supposedly this many people. And it's like, wow. But we need to make it clear that one victim is far too many.
Oh, absolutely.
And the numbers here don't matter. It's what this man did and what he was capable of doing. He was convicted of 24 murders. He was put on trial for 27.
27, yep.
But he says that this is what Fritz claimed, which a lot of serial killers do, Mike. He claimed that the number was probably closer to 50 or 70, between 50 and 70, to the best of his knowledge.
Whether that's an accurate account from what they have done, or is it something that of their ego that this is what I did.
That's what I'm saying. It's the ego. It's absolutely ego. So it's like, well, since I'm already caught and I'm I can't do anything else about it, I might as well make it worse than what it is. But maybe it's true. We don't know.
Yeah, right.
Mike, we need to dive into some of these sick and twisted aspects of this man's evil life, but we have to take a time traveling excursion.
Yeah. It gets worse, folks.
It gets worse, folks, and we're gonna talk all about it. So, if you would like, we hope to see you on the other side of our time traveling excursion. You gonna hang around, Igor? Igor, are you gonna hang around?
No.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, hold on, boys and girls. We shall be right back. And we are back after yet another successful time traveling excursion, and it seemed literally seamless to our awesome zoners out there, Mike. Remember, let's not forget that. Zoners. So thank you very much, zoners. I can't say it like that.
Term there?
I like it. I like it. I have to say it just as like zoners. Hey, thanks, zoners, instead of going zoners.
Yeah.
I don't like that one. So where we left off was right after Fritz committed his second murder, after a 4-year span of going murder-free, while still committing, petty thefts, burglary, and such. And I wanted to make it clear that when we say that Hans was his accomplice, and there was reasons behind him being convicted of these horrific crimes, is because he was sort of, how do you want to describe him, Mike? He went out and he chose Fritz's victims. He was out and about kind of beforehand, and he was picking and choosing. This guy hangs out at the railway station. I think you'd like him. I think we'd like them. And you should go get him, basically.
Yeah. And Hans Grans, he would assist in these things, and all he would ask for in return is just a piece of the liver.
Oh, that's it?
I don't know.
Mike. just
but but that is not saying that that's a true statement.
No,
but it goes along with
of course it does.
Some things that
and we could go on a whole tangent about how evil was Hans Grans, or however you want to pronounce his name. If you are going out and choosing people, even if you had nothing to do with physically murdering them, but by picking and choosing and pointing them out to someone that will murder them, what does that make you? Are you
a complete accomplice?
Are you just as bad as Fritz?
Yep.
You're sending these people to their deaths, essentially.
Yep. It should be convicted of murder as well.
Yeah, so
an accomplice to murder, at the very least.
Okay, so we spoke of Fritz's modus operandi, where he uses the guise of being a policeman, and he became very, very, very adept at that, as we mentioned earlier, so much so that a security guard at the railway station actually identified Fritz as an actual policeman because he thought he was a policeman.
Right.
It was during this time, now this part right here, Mike, this adds to the sadistic nature of Mr. Fritz Haarmann. Mental illness aside, I'm sorry, I'm going to probably come across as cold right there, but this type of stuff just irritates the hell out of me. And you can't tell me that you can blame all this on mental illness. It was between February 1923 and June of 1924. It isn't known for certain, but Fritz actually came across an ad in a newspaper. This is true, which this ad sought information on one of the missing boys. It was during this time tons of kids and people were going missing. I think I read that in 1923, over 600 people in 1923 alone went missing in Hanover, Germany, Mike. So obviously not all of them can be attributed to Fritz and Hans Grans, but hell, they definitely played a huge role in that, that's for sure. But 600 people gone missing in 1923. Now, after coming across this ad, after reading it and discovering that the boy featured in this ad was one of his many victims, well, you know what Fritz did? Fritz saw that the ad was offering a lot of money for any information that could aid in helping the boy's parents find him. Well, Fritz thought this would be just delightful to pretend to be a criminologist, offer his assistance, also picking up that money, offer his assistance by going to the parents and as if he had info to help them find where their lost child was. Now, the parents welcomed him into their home. They were just beyond hopeful that he could help them, provide them answers. But unfortunately, all that happened was Fritz sat there, listened to them reveal details. Listen to them reveal details that he had already known, they had already had, any other tidbits that they may have to offer. And Fritz did not offer any helpful information on his own. It was actually said by the parents that Fritz spent most of the time, quote unquote, laughing hysterically. And then he even tried to collect more money that they had offered in their ad after providing no assistance on his own. So that little sidebar right there, that when I read that just, it made my blood boil because he was giddy, Mike. He was getting off on this.
Yeah.
He wanted to get their hopes up, but he wanted to fool them, and he wanted to see their hopes dashed.
You watch him crash, yep.
Now, is that something that you can just say, well, he's mentally ill, so he didn't mean it?
It's cold and calculated.
Exactly. That's the
He
perfect
knows
way.
exactly what he's doing.
Yep. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
That's a perfect way of describing it, too. Simple and to the point. Cold and calculated.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was going through that, I was afraid that you were not listening, Mike, because I thought that you had froze up for a second, but you were just listening intently. Right?
I was.
Okay. Sometimes it looks like Mike literally freezes when he's not frozen from Zoom, the Zoom call here. He's just staring blankly towards the...
And then when I move slightly and look up or whatever, I kind of scare Patrick.
Oh, but I also give a sigh of relief too. I'm like, oh, okay. Whew, he hasn't died in some sort of weird frozen catatonic state.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sitting here for 5 years in the same position, somebody finds me with cobwebs on me.
He died doing what he loved. Now, again, as we said, and we at the risk of repeating ourselves here, obviously Hans was helping Fritz out here during his 6-year run of pure mayhem here. Now, Fritz needed to, and Hans, they needed to kind of maintain their fake persona. They needed to kind of maintain their standing within the community. And so, as we mentioned earlier, they would sell or donate the clothes of, guess who? Their victims to underprivileged people throughout Hanover. Now, this is the part where it starts getting gross. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the meat that Mr. Fritz sold, Mike? Or am I putting you on the spot there? Do you need me to guide you a little bit?
Well, no. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Well, without revealing any of the details yet,
the details is what is really going to turn this episode into a.
Well, we'll set up the details. We'll let Mike we'll let Mike cover some of the gross details here, but I'll set it up by as I said, Hans and Fritz would sell the clothes and the possessions of their victims.
Yeah, he would keep a lot of the possessions.
They keep a lot of them, which is a very common trait for serial killers. They love keeping something from their victims, a memento of some sorts. And they would sell and donate the possessions and clothes to the underprivileged, the poor throughout Hanover. As I said earlier, kind of taking advantage of them.
Well, even this one, like Fritz. Let's see.
Yep. Yes.
There's a 17-year-old traveling salesman, Fritz Wittig, whom Haarmann would later state that he killed upon the insistence of Grans, as he had worn a good new suit that Grans coveted.
Well, there you go. See, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Okay,
crazy.
So not only are they sick and twisted and depraved and evil, they're also materialistic. So
very. Yeah.
And again, that's another common trait of serial killers. They love owning things. That's something that's in their psychosis. They need to have the good stuff, and a lot of them, not all of them, quite a few of them. But what I was getting at earlier, just a minute or two ago, is when Fritz started selling, he had a pretty successful illegal meat trading business going on in Hanover. And he would sell what was labeled as, well, it wasn't labeled as black market, but he would sell on the black market what was labeled as beef or pork.
Or horse meat.
But Mike, did you kind of want to take it from there? What was going on?
Well, it was rumored that
the meat market there.
Yeah, he didn't just kill these people and just leave them in an alley. They were dismembered. It was rumored that he chopped up bodies, and because the meat that he would sell to these black market meat markets, whatever, they were always chopped into like small squares or like a ground beef type thing.
They were canned.
Like you're right, and it's like you said, he would say that they were beef or pork or horse meat. Which they did eat a lot of horse meat back then in different places. But anyway, it was rumored that it was actually his victims that he was selling, and rumored also that he partook in some of this flesh himself.
It is rumored that he was a cannibal.
Yes.
Was Hans Grans also a cannibal? That isn't necessarily known for certain. And
not much is said about that.
It is strongly hinted at that the butcher of Hanover, Mr. Fritz Haarmann, definitely was a cannibal.
Well, probably how he got his name, the Butcher.
Well, one of the reasons he got the name of the Butcher was because of, as you said, Mike, the dismemberment of his victims.
Right. He did dismember his victims. They weren't, like I said, they weren't just dumped in an alley. They were usually dumped in the river, which I cannot think of what the name of the river was. But
the Line, Leine.
Yep. Yes. The first victim, his very first victim, actually was buried. The rest of them, after that burial of the first one, then he dismembered and threw them in the river. But his last victim was disposed of in a lake.
And it needs to be pointed out is that was the beginning of Fritz's demise as far as finally coming under arrest for good, is when body parts and bones started washing ashore on the Line River. I believe 2 young girls were walking along the river banks when they discovered a skull.
A human skull, yeah.
And then another...
Determined to be that of a young male age between 18 and 20.
Yeah.
And bearing evidence of a knife wound.
And another skull was discovered not that long afterwards. But, it made them actually dam all these discoveries here made them decide to dam the river and do a thorough search because bones were washing ashore. And the final tally, Mike, was over 500 bones and human body parts were eventually discovered on the riverbed of the Line River. It was identified as being from a minimum of 22 human individuals. Now I need to read something here, Mike. I need to read a quote from Mr. Fritz here. I'm jumping ahead just a little bit. But Fritz did claim that after committing murders, that he says he felt guilty. Every time he committed a murder, he said he felt guilty afterwards.
Yeah, but I'll have fun the next time.
Exactly. I'll feel bad for about a half an hour, and then I'll forget about it, and then I'll start looking for the next victim. He said that he would, quote unquote, I shouldn't say quote unquote yet. He said that he would cover the faces of the dead when they're still in his apartment, so then, quote unquote, it wouldn't be looking at me. I mean, that's right. Think about it. He says it. I mean,
it's kind of like it puts the lotion on.
Okay, please stop. Just don't try. Just don't try on that.
Well, that was Silence of the Lambs.
I know what it was. So.
I always let people know what I'm referencing, and Patrick gets so upset. I know.
Well, and I think our listeners are intelligent too. They are. They know.
Well, see, I do such bad.
So when you say like
imitations that I feel like I have to explain myself sometimes.
So I think, Mike's
it puts the lotion in the basket.
Mike sits there and he says, no, I am your father. And then he'll say, that was from Star Wars. Says, yeah, I know it's from Star Wars. It's like, I get it. So, okay, anyways.
Okay.
Getting back to the quote I wanted to read here. When he started to talk about during his confession years later after he was arrested, when he was talking about how he disposed of the victims. This is a quote. I'd make 2 cuts in the abdomen and put the intestines in a bucket. Then I'd soak up the blood and crush the bones until the shoulders broke. Now I could get to the heart, lungs, and kidneys and chop them up and put them in my bucket. I'd take the flesh off of the bones and I'd put it in my wax cloth bag. It would take me 5 or 6 trips to take everything and throw it down the toilet or into the river. I always hated doing this, but I couldn't help it. My passion was so much stronger than the horror of the cutting and the chopping.
The horror.
Okay, Fritz. He
probably thought of himself as a craftsman.
Oh, I'm sure he took joy in it. I'm sure he was, I don't want to sound morbid, but I'm sure he got better and better at it, and it probably got less and less messy, and he enjoyed it more and more each time. But again, the idea of I always felt bad. Man, I felt bad. It's like, no, you didn't. I don't buy into any remorse from any of these people. Am I wrong?
I didn't want to do it. I felt I owed it to them.
Yeah, shit. Mike, am I wrong in feeling no remorse when they say I felt bad? Or, am I being too judgmental of a serial killer, Mike? Did they really truly feel bad?
I would say not.
I don't know.
And that last was a quote from...
Oh, God.
Never mind. How about a Fresca? Top notch.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
Another one here. This will probably go over most of our listeners' heads. Mike will sit here and he'll all of a sudden he'll start yelling with his arm straight up in the head, and he'll go, oh, Mr. Carter. And then he'll say, that was from Welcome Back, Kotter. It's like, yeah,
Oh.
Anyways, sorry, Mike. I'm teasing.
I'm so bad.
No, you're...
God.
Oh, that's going to be a soundbite right there. I need to write that down. 109, 10. I'm so bad. That's a soundbite the future.
I want to hear it on the next episode.
Oh, I'm going to get that done for the Patreon episode coming up immediately following that. That's great.
There you go.
Oh, man. Okay, getting back to the depraved sickness here. Mike, I think actually, I did read earlier, tell me if I'm wrong, did you see this? That he was actually reported to the authorities, a woman who bought some meat from him on the market was suspicious of the meat. She reported it to authorities saying that I think this is something weird and odd. They actually took her seriously. They brought an analyst to study it only to discover that it was pork.
Really?
I mean, so what's going on there?
Well,
Was that just a mistake on the woman's part, or was that a pure scientific gaffe on the analyst's part? I mean,
well, maybe it was. I'm sure not all the meat was. Maybe he threw in pork and horse and beef.
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't 100% human all the time, and
very, very true.
Just so happened that this lady got a bad piece of pork, and she thought something should be looked into, and nope, just pork.
Just pork. Now, if you were lucky enough to be a
human
woman,
meat is a lot like pork, I've heard.
Well, I don't want to even think about that. So,
I don't know for sure.
I have no clue. But if you were lucky enough to be a friend of Fritz, Mike, he would often surprise friends with gifts of sausage and select cuts of beef whenever he could sell it fast enough. So,
Farmer Vincent.
Yeah,
there you go.
So here you go, my pal, my buddy, some pure, lean, tasty loin of some sort. Yeah. Don't ask me where I got it. Just whatever you do, don't ask me. Because I might confess. Oh, man alive.
Farmer Vincent from Motel Hell, by the way.
Good Lord.
Anyhow. Whew. So where are we going with this next? It's just, there's a, and I don't want to bring this up and probably until the last, but his signature that if you saw a body, you would know it was him because of, but let's get through this other. What did I do?
I don't know what you did. What happened?
Something. I do not know. Anyway, but we'll get to that.
Well, we mentioned, it was after this time, we'd already mentioned that these two children playing by the river line when they just came across that human skull, and that basically started the downfall for Fritz after damming the river. And they said they found all those body parts. It's finally led to. Sorry, I'm trying to find the spot here that I want to start with. I sound really intelligent right there. I apologize, everybody, because I got distracted. I thought my dog was having a problem under the desk here, but he's okay.
Your dog was chewing on a piece of pork.
Well, in all sincerity, like about 3 weeks ago, my golden retriever Vigo, just out of nowhere, he just had this terrifying seizure, and it freaked me out.
Really?
Yeah.
Who did?
Vigo, my golden retriever.
Vigo. Yeah.
So then he was.
And how old is he?
He's going to be 4.
Really?
He was born on my birthday. So we share a birthday. But yeah, he was sound asleep, and it was really interesting. And very, very brief here. It was he was sound asleep. Posse was sleeping, but also I noticed that Posse sat up, and he's like looking at Vigo, and I'm like, because Vigo always lays at my feet on my recliner. I'm in my recliner. Vigo's at my feet. A lot of times I have my feet up on Vigo as he likes having my feet up on him. And Posse starts staring at him, and I'm like, what's going on? And he gets up and he starts like, Posse's acting weird, and he's looking at Vigo, and Vigo hadn't done anything yet, but Posse could sense something was coming on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden he just went into this really weird, scary fit, and
how long did it last?
Probably about it seems like it lasts a lot longer than it did, I'm sure.
Right, absolutely.
Probably about a minute, maybe a minute and a half.
Really?
But he never, he was laying down and he started, and then he tried to stand up, and he couldn't stand up because his legs.
So he woke up.
He did. His legs were flailing. His front legs were flailing. He was standing up on his back legs, and he couldn't stand up on his front legs. And then he finally got up and he's just shaking and stuff, and his head is looking, he's just doing these weird, what, I don't even know how to describe him. And I was very, very calm, and I just held him and not tightly. And and then I walked him outside onto the deck, and he just, it took a while, and he finally slowly stopped. And then it's almost like he snapped out of it, and he starts like going, and then he's just all lovey-dovey and like normal again. It was really, I hate saying shit like that.
That is so scary. I mean, keep an eye on that if that starts happening more often. There's
absolutely
neurological something or.
Absolutely. Yep. Trust me, I've done a bunch of, I've looked into a bunch of it and bunch of it. And I know it says golden retrievers can be prone to epileptic seizures. Sure. So it's like, if it happens more than once a month, definitely take them in. And
absolutely.
It's been over a month now. Well, almost a month. So hopefully that's a one and done type thing. So
it could be.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I've worked with people and patients where, that especially when I worked in group homes where, you have to watch your people and that are prone to seizures, and you have to just, as soon as you see somebody having a seizure, you got to time it. See how long it lasts, see what happens through it, how they come out of it, and it's horrible. It's just a frightening thing.
Yeah, no, it was not fun. Not fun. So he's looking at me right now. He's like, "Are you talking about me?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm talking about you." So Mike, here I wanted to get to. I think it's important that we talk about before the episode's over. I want to name the victims' names. I think it's important to do that when we can do that.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely.
Because we need to make it clear. These are humans. These are people. These are people who had families.
Totally innocent.
Innocent people who were taken from this earth because this guy had a sexual desire to do so, a sexual frenzy to do so. Mike, Fritz referred to his habit of inflicting what he called love bites on his victims. Yeah. What was that all about, Mike?
My God.
Let's just talk about it.
Well, okay, so he raped his victims as well as killed them, and as he was raping his victims, he would have what he would.
Yeah, Macy doesn't like that either. I know. I get it, Macy. It's not good.
He had what he would call a love bite, which was his signature, where he would bite onto the Adam's apple and either chew it out altogether or just bite through the Adam's apple, and it would end up, they would die from asphyxiation at times, choking on their own blood, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But that was his signature move.
His love bite.
Yeah, that was what he would call his love bite. Tearing their throat out.
He said that it would be during moments of sexual frenzy, as he, would later describe it. And he would claim that he never meant to do it. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, you did. I mean, you got off on this. You're sodomizing these poor young boys.
Youngest, which is 10 years old.
Oh, my God. I mean, Fritz, I hope you're burning in hell right now. I really do. I mean, if you believe in heaven and
I'm
hell...
sure he's listening to the podcast, all pissed off.
You think so? He's in another dimension somewhere and it's going, "Oh, I'll get you, young whippersnappers." I don't know.
Scratch your eyes out. What?
Come on. Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, he always said that he, felt guilty. Another quote from Fritz here. He says, "I never intended to hurt those youngsters, but I knew that if I got going, something would happen, and that made me cry. I would throw myself on top of those boys and bite through the Adam's apple, throttling them at the same time." So let me repeat that. I never intended to hurt those youngsters, but I knew that if I got going, Something would happen, and that made me cry. Then he follows that up by saying, I would throw myself on top of these boys and bite through their Adam's apple, throttling them at the same time. So what?
Throttling them?
Throttling them at the same time.
Yeah, it'd be strangling.
Strangling them. So
yeah, that's right.
What part of that made you cry, Fritz?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
No. It doesn't work that way.
No, it's just that he's so sick and just demented and, dare I say, demonically possessed.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a really...
That's always got to come up.
It does, but that's a really sensitive term right now because with all these, just tragic and totally, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to get political here, but all these mass shootings here and some of these just whack jobs claiming that the devil made them do it. And so that's getting all sorts of attention. And right now, that's a really hot topic word right now. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. So they're all just demented and sick and evil, no matter what.
Yeah.
What else? Now this is the depravity doesn't stop there, boys and girls. Now, as we said earlier, he would often sell the clothes and meat of his victims to friends, or even give them away to friends as gifts. Fritz believed that he was driven by the passion, beauty, and sensuality of each victim. This drive...
Except if you got a boil on your face.
Yeah, right. That boil saved you, bub. Now, this drive, Mike, this passion, also led Fritz to chew off the penises of his victims.
What?
Chew off the penises.
I didn't see that part
of his victims before disposal.
Well, these things got a little bit of wang.
Oh no! No!
Jeez.
That's right. Oh, I remember that movie, Hollywood Nights.
Yeah, another reference there.
It does have a bit of wang in it. Yeah. Oh, god damn. I used to have that on our soundboard. Mike does have a little bit of wang.
Yep, you did. I remember that.
Oh, good lord.
Back in the day.
Now he says, this is another quote from Fritz. Often after I had killed, I pleaded to be put away in a military asylum, but not a madhouse. If Hans had really loved me, he would have been able to save me. Believe me, I'm not ill. It's only that I occasionally have funny turns. I want to be beheaded. It'll only take a moment. Then I will be at peace. Okay. He's not mentally ill, he says, Mike. He just occasionally has funny turns. His funny turns include dismembering, disemboweling, filleting.
Look at the shape of that liver.
Man, what a funny turn. What a funny turn. Well, one more thing. I need to bite off your wang because I'm having another funny turn. Oh, my gosh. We're not making light of what the hell this guy did.
No, we're not.
Good God almighty. So you never learned that little
I did not. Huh? I mean, good Lord God almighty. I mean,
but why not?
Jaw even just capable of doing that?
Yeah, but why not?
Well, Lorena Bobbitt did it.
Look, well, there you go. But look, think about it though, Mike. In such a sexual frenzy, and this guy is he's an animal at this time. There's a reason he was called the Vampire of Hanover. There's a reason he was called the Werewolf of Hanover. Because
the butcher.
The butcher, killing was not enough. He had to mutilate. He had to attack. He had to just bite. He had to tear them apart.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically with his own mouth.
Right.
I mean, why wouldn't he go after their genitals? Why wouldn't he?
Sure.
That is the focal point. I mean, why would it not be for
make his testicles into a pair of clackers, for crying out loud? I went too far on that one.
I hope you're talking about Fritz's, right? Yes. Yeah. Before he
exactly.
He deserved to have the same done to him before he was beheaded.
Well, it's just that the sickness and the depravity is just, I mean, it's like a bottomless pit where it just
No kidding.
anything is capable. This guy is capable of anything, but guilty, feeling bad, and even crying.
Nah,
Baloney.
makes no difference then, man. No difference whatsoever. Now, very, very briefly, because we are running late here, man, this is...
Yes, we are.
And this is great, though. But we have to do a Patreon episode immediately following this. But we need to clarify how he was finally brought to justice.
Well, he was under surveillance, actually. They were getting onto him and everything.
He absolutely was. Absolutely was. They were trying to do their job. They were trying to do their best. Now, as I said earlier, the remains that were found in the river line totaled more than 22 different people from what they were able to decipher. The coroner estimated the remains belonged to young men and boys between the ages of 15 and 20, but as Mike said, we know that he killed boys even younger than that. The police then began doing their best to solve the murders. They had several suspects, several deviants, or several people who have a deviant criminal history. And there was one suspect that was none other than a Fritz Haarmann. You know old Fritz Haarmann, Fritz himself. Now, they wanted to interrogate Fritz, but they had no way of finding him or linking him to the bodies, since they didn't even know who the bodies belonged to. Nevertheless, as Mike said, they kept him under surveillance. Finally, on June 23rd, 1924, they got their wish and were waiting for something to do so they could arrest him, finding something so they could arrest him. That day, Fritz was seen arguing with a 15-year-old Karl Fromm at a railway station. Fritz had picked up Fromm several days earlier and spent that time trying to get the boy to sleep with him willfully. When Fromm refused, Fritz took him to the station to try and make the boy return home. Karl refused, and the two began to argue. Fritz now became angry with Karl and turned him in to the railway police, accusing him of traveling with false documentation. Listen to that. He's like, oh, this boy didn't want to sleep with me, so I'm going to get you arrested. What a guy. What a guy. Once in custody, Karl told the officers of Fritz's sexual harassment and advances towards him. This was all they needed to hear. They took Fritz into custody that same day. The police questioned him about Karl's statement. Of course, he denied it. While they had him in, the police decided to also question Fritz about the murders, the unsolved murders from Hanover. He denied knowing anything about them initially. So much so until the police got to their wits' ends with Fritz when they finally caught a break that would bust the case open. And this break came in the form of a jacket that belonged to one of Fritz's victims that Fritz actually sold himself. The parents of missing boy Robert Witzel had been sitting outside of the chief commissioner's office during the interrogation of Fritz. Robert had been missing since April 26th of that same year. They were hoping the police could give them information on what may have happened to their son. Now, again, while waiting, they noticed a couple would walk to the station. Robert's mother immediately recognized the jacket that the man was wearing and asked him where he had obtained it. He responded by telling her that he had purchased it from a one and only Fritz Haarmann. Then showed her and the police the identification card that had been in the pocket. And, of course, the jacket did indeed belong to young Robert Witzel. So this basically set everything off. Fritz first appeared calm, cool, collected, even polite when they began to question him about all of these accusations, these murders. They grilled him more and more and more until he became agitated. He was fidgety, picked at his fingernails, started to become irate. Now, this happened for several days. The inquiries became more and more extreme on the part of the police, and Fritz actually became irritated to the point of suffering maniacal rages.
Right, and he started to smell like raw sewage.
He did. He couldn't help it either. That was he was. I don't know if that was the crap in his pants or what, but long story short, Fritz caved in. Finally, made a full confession.
But the police, they tore his apartment apart.
Yeah.
Searching through it, and they had found that the floors, the walls, the bedding, they were found to be extensively blood-stained. But of course, Haarmann said initially, attempted to explain this fact as a byproduct of his illegal trading in contraband meat.
Right.
Yes, I'm sure that was part of it.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, so he was a pretty damn messy slaughterer of animals. So much so that it got all over his wallpaper and such.
And his neighbors are, I didn't know what the deal was. I hearing that chainsaw going off every once in a while. I don't know.
Yeah, and the horrific screams and shrieks of young men from the room either. Yeah, I don't know. He's kind of turned a blind eye, I guess, the other way. But we don't know that. But man,
horrifying.
Later that year, July 8th, Hans Granz was arrested July 8th, 1924. We already talked about that. We simply have no time, but we encourage you, if you're interested, to do a deep dive into the life and times of Fritz Haarmann, because the trial itself was pretty spectacular. It lasted like 9 or 10 days. Fritz ended up, like we said, accusing Hans, and they were firing back and forth at each other. It was very dramatic. Friedrich was eventually beheaded. And I want to get to his last quote here. I'm sorry, Mike. His last quote upon being convicted. Where is it? Well, one of his quotes that he said was, "I want."
Well, he did have a final wish too of having an expensive cigar to smoke.
Yeah.
And Brazilian coffee to drink in his cell.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he didn't get it.
I am guilty, gentlemen, but hard though it may be, I want to die as a man. Immediately prior to placing his head upon the execution apparatus, Haarmann added,
Yes.
I repent, but I do not fear death.
There you go.
Man.
You won't kill me. I'll be back. Yes, I shall be amongst you for all eternity. And now you yourselves have also killed. You should know it. Hans Granz was innocent. And that's what was included in his second letter, by the way. That wasn't his words, but oh, man alive, this guy. I'm like at a loss of words. Loss of words. Mike, final thoughts. I mean,
well, we can't do the story justice. I mean, all we can do was what we did, going over facts and what happened, and just the demented whatever of this evil man.
See, you can tell you're at a loss of words.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm stumbling.
I mean, and we're going to learn more and more. The more you look into the guy, the more you find out shit that just absolutely, like you said, Mike, stuns you, and it makes you question. That makes you question the existence of humans, for God's sake. Sometimes,
humanity.
It's like,
what percentage of humanity is this?
It's like, are we truly capable of this?
What we covered tonight.
Are we truly capable of this? Man, I guess there's no better way to wrap it up than to just say, encourage our listeners, if you are interested, to do a further deep dive into this man, the psychosis of this man. We hope we gave you a fairly decent starting point here tonight in our dive into true crime, again with Fritz, the Butcher of Hanover, Haarmann. He's right up there, Mike, with the most deprived, most depraved, most evil, and sick and twisted bastards of all time.
And I tell you, people, it is just one of a long list of sick and twisted and demented serial killers over history.
And that's scary.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, we need to do a Patreon. Thank you so much. I appreciate this for making yourself available. Of
course.
And I don't mean to cut us off short and say, well, we need to do a Patreon, but we do need to do a Patreon because, man, we have awesome zoners out there on the Patreon world. If you guys enjoy what you hear tonight, particularly if you enjoy our paranormal episodes, you would love our Patreon page. If you've made it this far, I guarantee you would love our Patreon content. This will be exclusive episode number 49. Next week, number 50. Let's think of something special.
Yeah, something special for the Big 5-0.
Big 5-0. Mike, until next time, what do our awesome pals
I'm going to detach a little bit
need to do
this evening? You know that I always want you to peace out, but this time, don't be a Pedro.